Well, it was 3 days ago that I was quite happy and feeling quite optimistic because John Bolton had just been fired like a dog. Ostensibly because he was far too hawkish for the likes of President Donald Trump. Bolton got Trump into quite a few not-so-great situations and made him look bad as national security advisor because, he pushed to be too hawkish, and when the president tried to be a bit more conciliatory, Bolton always ended up not quite stabbing him in the back, but certainly making a fool out of him in cases like Venezuela and especially the Hanoi summit with North Korea, to where John Bolton sabotaged that completely. Again, it would seem without really, the president's full support, because that was a big thing that the president was hoping, would work out well. And of course, the media at the time, bought Bolton's, his scheme, hook, line, and sinker, and they were saying, oh, this Trump, look at him, what an idiot. He tried to negotiate with the North Koreans. They're just too crazy. You can't negotiate with the North Koreans. We'll never have peace with them. The only answer is to bomb them, which is exactly what Bolton wanted the media to say. That's why he sabotaged the summit and made Trump look like an idiot. And so, when I was quite surprised, you might imagine, when Trump started tweeting later in the week, yesterday, I believe, that, I fired Bolton, not because he was such a big hawk, but you know why? Because Bolton was way too weak. I, Donald Trump, am far tougher than John Bolton ever was. And in fact, John Bolton was holding me back the entire time. He was keeping me from being as hawkish and warlike as I really am. And so whatever optimism I had for the future after Bolton's firing on Wednesday had been deflated by the president's words on Friday. Because that is the exact opposite thing that I wanted to hear from Trump now that Bolton's finally gone. In fact, on Wednesday, Trump said some things that I agreed with about Bolton. He sounded like he was, mad at Bolton for being such a chicken hawk, and I believe he even said, Bolton was the one that got us into Iraq, implying that the Iraq war was a bad thing, which it was. I mean, killed 1 million Iraqis. That's kind of bad, and the country is still a basket case, and Western Iraq has never really been domesticated since then. But now here we are, Donald Trump, the same man who, ridicules Bolton for getting us into the war in Iraq, now it would seem wants to get us into a war in Venezuela, a war that would be far worse for the United States than the war in Iraq, as I've said over and over. A war in Venezuela would do everything, to Venezuela that was done to Iraq. But we wouldn't be insulated by, a few continents and oceans between us. The repercussions of what happened in the Iraq War spread and into the Middle East and arguably into Europe and North Africa, but it did not directly affect the United States. The destabilization of the Middle East drove, lots of refugees into Europe and, led to certain Middle East countries burning to the ground and being completely decimated and, creating hundreds of thousands of internally displaced people. All of this, really stems back to the Iraq War in one way or another, or the greater war on terror and the U.S.'s meddling in the Middle East. But none of this came back to bite us, at least not, here in America. I, as an American, have never really experienced any of the troubles of what happened in the Iraq War. The only way that the Iraq War really affected Americans is if you knew somebody who got hurt over there or was killed. And considering that, only 4,500 soldiers were killed in Iraq, that's a pretty minor impact on the overall American society. Now, a war in Venezuela, however, would have all those effects, but they would be right on America's doorstep. South America is not that far away. I live in Florida, and, you can take a boat. You'd have to be a big boat, but you can take a boat from where I live to Venezuela. Much in the same way that someone can take a boat from, Tripoli to Italy. The path that refugees would take in the case of a war with Venezuela, on the level of the war in Syria or the war in Iraq, would not be in the direction of Europe. They would not be flowing all the way across the Atlantic Ocean into Africa and Europe. all of these refugees would be flowing up into North America from South America. Trump would create a crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border, and, like I said, I think that you would even see a lot of people trying to come over to the United States in boats across the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. A war with Venezuela would be far worse for the United States than, Bolton's beloved war in Iran that he never ended up getting. I'd much rather see the U.S. go to war with Iran than Venezuela, and that's a purely selfish, choice on my part. I don't want to go to war with either of them, but if the U.S. is going to pick one, if the government's going to pick one, pick the one that affects me less, please. Bomb Tehran all you want. I think it's a terrible tragedy. I'd feel very bad for the people who were killed, and I would certainly speak out against the U.S. government, and I would call my congressman and call him a murderer, and I'd do, everything that I could as a citizen to try and stop that. But I'd much rather that happen to them, if it's going to happen to somebody, than it would, say, happening to people who are in a country that are a little closer to where I live and can actually affect me. So in that respect, it would seem now that the Trump administration without Bolton may potentially be even more dangerous than the Trump administration with Bolton. And I can't believe that I'm even saying that. But, I mean, facts are facts. Mike Pompeo came out, the Secretary of State, and he pledged the total support for the Colombian government in the case that there just happens to be some kind of, random war with Venezuela, because that's just something that happens every once in a while. And then he just wanted to say to the Colombians, hey, by the way, if you guys happen to start any kind of a war, if you get into any major regional conflict with Venezuela, we totally got your back, and we're going to invade Venezuela to make sure we defend Colombia. We're not forecasting anything here. We're just throwing that out there. No biggie. And of course, I hope nobody believes that because it's total BS. What Pompeo's doing is he's nudging and winking at the Colombians, and he's saying, "Hey guys, if you want to go start a war, could you please just do that for us? Because, we kind of want to go to war with Venezuela, but we're America, so we don't start wars. We only defend ourselves. And so we need to make it look like that that we're not the ones getting into this war and that we're just coming to the aid of our poor, helpless friend, Colombia." And so what Pompeo has essentially done is he's cut the Colombians a blank check, very similar to what the Kaiser of Germany did to the Austrian Kaiser during World War I. He said to Franz Josef, hey, you want to attack Serbia and start a war with Russia and France? We totally got your back. Germany will back you up all the way. Because we really want to go to war with Russia and France anyway. So it would help us if you could give us a good excuse for that, so that, we won't be blamed for starting a war. And, of course, what ended up happening was the Germans, even somewhat unfairly, are still blamed for starting World War I. And the same will be true in the history books if the U.S. does this here and now. If the U.S. goads the Colombians by cutting them a blank check into attacking Venezuela and then creating, starting this terrible war on the American supercontinent that leads to a massive cascading refugee crisis that will spread throughout all the Latin American countries and will, of course, be filled with people who aren't even Venezuelan refugees trying to jump on board the train, the money train to America. I think I even saw a headline somewhere about Trump trying to reassure Senator Marco Rubio that he's not going soft now that he's fired Bolton. Replacing John Bolton with Marco Rubio is not an upgrade by any means. The only positive at this point that I can think of that I can still salvage from the Bolton firing, and it may not even be a net positive, but at least it is a positive. It's that Trump now seems much more open to trying to make peace with Iran and North Korea, which are, of course, the chief enemies of John Bolton. If Trump can work out some kind of North Korean deal, that would be fantastic. We may even have a deal by now if it weren't for John Bolton destroying the Hanoi summit. But again, that's, it's a counterfactual, so we can't really debate that very effectively. But also, if Trump is able to try and de-escalate things with Iran, because we looked very close to going to war with Iran not too long ago, and I'm sure John Bolton was pushing for that quite hard, and thankfully that was avoided. So, hey, maybe Trump just feels like in order to look tough, he has to beat up on some country, at least verbally, at all times. So in order for him, I guess, to feel like he can negotiate and make peace with the North Koreans and the Iranians, maybe he just feels like he has to threaten the Venezuelans. And if all they are empty threats, I don't like it, but hey, I won't complain too much once it's all said and done. If in 20 years it turns out that Trump was just bluffing, he was trying to save face and distract people while he made peace deals with North Korea and Iran, I will praise him for it then. But as of right now, I'm not going to hold my breath. So if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.